This is an image from the final scene of the movie The Walk, which was produced by Robert Zemeckis. And those of you who have been into all of this material for a long time will be aware of Robert Zemeckis and his role in the Back to the Future trilogy, which in hindsight very obviously encoded the 9/11 ritual into it. Of course, those of us who grew up watching those films had no idea that this was going on. Rather, it was only in a subconscious way that we were taking in this information, and that's how we all took it in when we watched films before any of us became aware of what they were actually doing. Anyways, the plot of the movie The Walk involves a French artist who put a wire in between the two towers and walked across it, which has all of this resonance to the 9/11 trilogy that Zemeckis was also involved in. You have Petit being played by Joseph Gordon-Levitt, dressed like Marty McFly was at one point in the movie. And then, of course, you have the wire that they use in Back to the Future Part 2 to connect. Well, I guess it was in Part 1 as well. The time travel plot is a little non-linear in that way. But they connect the clock tower that is struck by lightning to the DeLorean with a wire in a similar way. And of course, after the DeLorean flies into the movie theater, the movie screen as it were, there's a flaming 9/11 left in its wake. And then throughout the trilogy at different points in time, you have the DeLorean flying or time traveling into a different dimension as an aspect of screen technology is nearby or involved. In Part 3, it's an outdoor movie theater screen for a drive-in. In Part 1, it's the photo booth that the DeLorean is about to crash into, and then the van that's following them crashes into it. And also, Zemeckis was a producer of Contact, the movie with Jodie Foster and Matthew McConaughey, where instructions are sent to the human race to evolve, as it were. And in order to read these instructions, someone has to figure out, oh, we need to perceive them in a different dimension, an extra dimension. And once they do that, they have the schematics needed to build the machine that will send them into the wormhole that allows them to travel to meet the entities that will go about this process. Later in the film, they say to her, oh, well, we didn't build this system. This is just how it's always been done. And Contact came out in 1997, 4 years before 9/11. And if you see the metaphor here that they're building through these films, specifically the ones that Zemeckis is involved in, you can see how 9/11 was Contact, as it were. And you can see a similar idea in the video that I just did on the Millennium Hilton and the metaphorical monolith that was at Ground Zero when the towers were destroyed. Contact comes out in 1997, which is one of the first movies along these lines. But this one just comes right out and tells you, okay, yeah, it was happening all in her mind. She didn't go anywhere. The people who were watching her just saw her fall through this device and just plop right into the water. She didn't go anywhere. But then, as they say at the end of the movie, there was 18 hours of static footage that didn't pick up anything that was attached to her head and viewing what she viewed. The idea being, yes, this was some sort of psychic travel that she embarked on, in the same way that it's depicted in 2001: A Space Odyssey, you see. And then you have that resonance to 2001: A Space Odyssey on 9/11/2001 with the Millennium Hilton at Ground Zero in the context of the Back to the Future trilogy, and The Walk, Petit, played by Joseph Gordon-Levitt, who is then in Looper, which is a plot that centers around, again, time travel and this character going back into the past to meet himself as they are trying to protect a child who has psychic abilities, who will change the future. All of that is going on in the context of The Walk when it actually comes out many years after 9/11. And Zemeckis here is showing you in the last scene the completion of the alchemical ritual that was 9/11. In Alchemy, you have the metaphorical concept of turning lead into gold. But also there is a literal tradition where if you go back into the old books of people who were alive during the alchemical era, they believe, and even people to this day have written about this, that you can actually create gold. And then there's a subplot in that narrative where people say, oh no, that's also a metaphor, but you can create a material from this chemistry that is alchemy that will give you everlasting life. And that's kind of where stories about Saint Germain come from, and that's a whole rabbit hole in and of itself that I don't have time to get into here. But this is what Zemeckis is showing you at the end of The Walk. He's showing you symbolically what 9/11 was and what those two towers represented as it relates to the ritual that it was. It was metaphorical, turning lead into gold. Metaphorically, the beginning of a psychic initiation ritual, a ritual of the collective mind. Our birth into their new age, metaphorically, which is symbolically depicted by Bowman, the Rainbow Man, the rainbow, which diffracts at 42 degrees. And then you have the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy telling you what's the answer to life, the universe, and everything. 42, the machine says. Going back to the idea of the veil, those who have eyes to see, Isis, the two eyes. No man has ever unveiled Isis, as all of these similar traditions remind you. And this is what he's showing you here. That's what it was. They were turned from lead to gold. And I don't need to remind you of everything they achieved through this ritual, this mass television ritual. It achieved so much along those lines, both that we were aware of in the moment and in the years after, and also only things that we're becoming aware of now, after 20 years have gone by. So I needed to get into all of that to get to what I want to focus on here, which is those who have done research into films like Back to the Future that show the Twin Towers being destroyed ahead of time. Well, there's a whole different aspect of this as it relates to the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco, where you can see how it has likewise been destroyed in a bunch of different films going all the way back here to 1955. And I don't know if it will actually be the target of something along the lines of 9/11 and the Twin Towers, but obviously symbolically the Golden Gate has a lot of importance in the context of a ritual like that, were they to do something along those lines. But based on what I've been getting into recently, I wonder if this is more metaphorical. And this was an idea that kind of came to the surface after I saw Finch, which again is another film that Zemeckis was involved in. And the plot here is, on a post-apocalyptic Earth, a robot built to protect the life of his creator's beloved dog learns about life, love, friendship, and what it means to be human. And the first thing to note, of course, is that finches and canaries were used by the coal miners to warn them if oxygen was being depleted. We have all heard, of course, of the canary in the coal mine, but they use finches as well. And so this is just a really interesting title in the context of the plot and the fact that Zemeckis was a producer of this film. In the sense of, hey, is this a canary in the coal mine type of message? Given the fact that it's a post-apocalyptic film, and the main character is called Finch, who is a man played by Tom Hanks, and he creates artificial intelligence. He creates a robot, an android, whatever you want to call it. And in the last scene of this film, we see the robot that is created walking off with the dog because, sorry to spoil it for you, but Tom Hanks' character doesn't survive. He was poisoned by radiation from a solar flare that had made much of the environment unlivable. And he sort of managed to survive using technology, created this artificial intelligence, and then they travel back to San Francisco, to the Golden Gate Bridge, and they find that this is one of the areas where it appears like the ozone layer has returned enough for life to survive out in the open. And that is interesting because Silicon Valley, of course, is in San Francisco, in that area. And I just wonder if all of these references to the Golden Gate Bridge in films and television, all kinds of different references. I mean, a skeptic would use the same excuse as they use for the Twin Towers. Well, this was a major landmark in the country. San Francisco is the symbolic Western Gate to America. And of course, this is going to be in a lot of films because of that. It's in close proximity to Hollywood, too. I mean, of course, a skeptic is going to say that, but we're past those kind of entry-level skeptic rebuttals, right? But I just wonder if it's being used in that way, the canary in the coal mine, like, hey, Silicon Valley and its role in digitizing us, bringing us to that eventuality, that sort of transhuman idea of the future, if that's what's being showed to us in all of these references. Because you have this android walking kind of into the proverbial sunset at the end of the film with the Golden Gate Bridge in the background. And then you have the same thing in the movie Bumblebee, which is a Transformer spinoff. And of course, a Transformer is a AI robot that is capable of, you know, turning into a car and then turning into a android. And here, Bumblebee is with a human being, and you can kind of get the idea of what I'm speculating on here, with the machine intelligence kind of leading the human across the Golden Gate Bridge. And then you have the idea of Bumblebee, the queen bee. You have the bee stuff all over masonry, the builders, right? And then all of that is compounded by the fact that the Matrix 4, the most recent newer Matrix, is set in San Francisco. They have the new Matrix that's built after the last one was kind of destroyed by Neo. Well, this new one is set in San Francisco, and there is a picture of the Golden Gate Bridge at one point. It's a painting that's in one of the buildings. So you go look at this kind of stuff in the context of all the times that it's been destroyed, right? It's destroyed in Terminator by a nuclear missile. Right. And in Superman as well, the fallen angel It's partially destroyed in an earthquake as a part of that, and then the fallen angel repairs it, turns back time. And this one, where it's actually destroyed in the Terminator franchise, is Genesis, right? But then it's also in all kinds of other films. The Love Bug, oh, that's an interesting one for it to be in. Given everything that I went into in the Skeleton Key post about when they put the Volkswagen Beetles in films, what it represents, the crushing of the thalamus, and then Videodrome reimagining the brain, right? So I just wonder if this one is more metaphorical in the sense of it's giving us a message about the future and what they have planned, but it's not necessarily literal in the way that the Twin Towers references were. This one's more, this is the Golden Gate Bridge. Silicon Valley is leading us into this future, and Finch from Zemeckis was the canary in the coal mine along these lines. The man doesn't survive. It's the dog and the robots that survive and walk off into the sunset, as it were. And of course, it's because of everything that transpired, it's sold to Apple, and we have the symbolic biting of the forbidden fruit, giving us this canary in the coal mine, Finch, about the future of technology and what it is doing to us in real time. You know, the neuroplastic brain, the way our very internal chemistry is being altered by being exposed to these screens, and what that's doing to everything, our attention spans, our view of human relationships, the steady progression into digital ID, social credit scores, and wearable technology, and then into actual technology that's infused into our DNA, which is the end goal here. And it's wild to think about that kind of thing, but I just thought I would get into it in light of what Zemeckis showed us at the end of The Walk. And the idea being, hey, if they were doing this in the 1980s and the 1990s and beyond, I'm sure they didn't stop. It's probably still there if you care to look for it. And I don't care enough to go through all of these movies in the way that you would have to find this sort of stuff. But maybe a fellow autist out there would be so inclined to do that sort of thing. Anyway, I'll leave it there. Later.